Imagine this. A pampered, arrogant heir strolling into your home, your personal sanctuary, and boldly declaring he's taking your wife for a weekend getaway. How would you respond to that? And just when you think it can't get worse, he starts throwing out threats like they're nothing. My first thought was to knock the smirk off his face with a punch, but I chose to handle things differently. That Thursday afternoon, I had just finished loading up my tools into my truck after a grueling day. The client I'd been dealing with for the past 2 weeks was infuriatingly indecisive about a custom staircase project. As a result, my schedule was suddenly free the next day. I'm Archie, 34 years old, a craftsman and the owner of a boutique carpentry business that specializes in high-end, custom staircases. My clients, the wealthy elite, mansion owners, luxury hotels, upscale restaurants, and corporate offices. People who don't bat an eye at dropping $50,000 or more for a one-of-a-kind staircase. I've been married to Lillian, a 29-year-old attorney with a focus on commercial and intellectual property law, for 4 years. Lillian is sharp, driven, and extremely career-focused, which is part of why we've held off on starting a family. She wanted to establish herself at her firm, Chandler Brickman and Goldman, first. When I pulled into the driveway around 4:30 p.m., I was caught off guard to see Lillian's car already there. That wasn't usual on Thursdays. She typically stayed late to get a head start on the next week. Curious, I let myself in through the back door, as I always did after a long day at the job site. I noticed the water pressure was lower than normal and wondered if Lillian was upstairs in the shower, a rare thing for her, since she preferred to shower either in the morning or before bed. After changing into something more comfortable, I headed upstairs to check on things. Sure enough, Lillian had just finished in the shower and was getting ready. She was wearing black fishnet stockings that clung to her legs seductively, and a sleek new black dress lay neatly on the bed, waiting to be put on. It wasn't just that she looked good. It was the way she was presenting herself, almost as if she had planned this moment meticulously. "Hey babe, what's going on? Did I forget something? Are we doing something tonight?" I asked, trying to sound casual, though my mind was already racing. Her response threw me off balance. After a heavy sigh, she spoke. "No, Archie, you haven't forgotten anything. I'm going out tonight, and you're not coming with me. I'll be back Sunday afternoon. I'm spending the weekend with Neville Chandler." I froze. What? What do you mean? Is this some kind of work trip?" I asked, completely thrown off. "No," she replied, her voice colder than I expected. "It's not for work. Neville booked a suite for us. I'll see you next week. This weekend is for him." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. "You're joking, right? Lillian, you can't just leave for the weekend with another man. What the hell is going on?" Her demeanor shifted, turning icy as she locked eyes with me. "You'd better get used to it, Archie. That's how Neville wants it. And trust me, you don't want to piss him off." I stood there, stunned, unable to believe what I was hearing. "So, let me get this straight. You're seriously just going to walk out the door, expecting me to sit here and accept it? And then what? Next week, we act like this never happened?" I shot back, disbelief in my voice. Her smile was almost condescending. "I never said it was just a one-off weekend, Archie. Neville hinted that this could become a regular thing. You'll have to learn to accept it. It'll be easier for you if you do." I felt my anger spike. "Lillian, you'd better think this through. If you think for 1 second I'm gonna let some smug jerk come in and run my life while treating me like a doormat, you're in for a serious wake-up call." But she wasn't listening. She kept on with her preparations, as if nothing I said mattered. Frustrated, I stormed downstairs, grabbed a beer from the fridge, and tried to calm myself. Just as I cracked it open, I heard a sleek Mercedes pull up outside. Neville Chandler had arrived. This wasn't the first time I'd crossed paths with Neville. We'd met a few years ago at one of CBH's Christmas parties. He was the definition of a power player, mid-40s, impeccably dressed, and oozing arrogance. He charmed the women effortlessly while treating the men around him like they were beneath him. From the moment I met him, I couldn't stand the guy. Lillian came down the stairs, clearly irritated, and opened the door. "Sorry about the wait, Neville. My husband seems to have misplaced his manners, she said, her voice sweet but dripping with submissiveness. A stark contrast to the way she usually spoke to me. Neville didn't waste any time. Hey, dusty boy. I hear you've got an issue with Lillian spending the weekend with me, he barked, swaggering into my living room like he owned the place. The anger that had been simmering inside me exploded. Listen, you arrogant prick, you've got about 5 seconds to get out of my house before I call the cops. I snapped, my fists clenched and ready. He laughed, a low, mocking sound, and glanced at Lillian, who smirked in response. Call the cops? Sure, go ahead. Let's see how they handle it. They won't do a damn thing, he sneered. Then, as if something had caught his eye, he added, Wait a second, are you recording me? He noticed the phone in my shirt pocket. Before I could even react, he yanked the phone from me, saw it was locked, and tossed it onto the floor. The screen shattered on impact with the ceramic tiles. Listen up, you pathetic nobody, Neville said with a cold smile. Your wife is spending the weekend with me, like it or not. He leaned in closer, his voice dark with menace. She'll be with me whenever I want her to be. And let me make this crystal clear. Your opinions don't matter. If you try to interfere, the consequences will be severe. Your life, already a joke, will become an absolute nightmare compared to what I can do. So, do yourself a favor and stay quiet this weekend. Don't cause any trouble. If I hear a peep about you threatening her, trying to get her to leave me, or doing anything stupid, like contacting my wife, be prepared to regret it. Everyone will hear about your little side business, including the money laundering and the disgusting files on your computer. Oh yes, I know about them. I stood there trying to keep my composure. But I couldn't show weakness, not now. I chose to let it slide, feigning indifference, but I was well aware how fragile the situation had become. That's easy enough to fix, I said, my voice flat. Uploading something to someone's computer? A few clicks, and anyone's reputation could be destroyed. But I didn't leave it there. Playing the part of the clueless fool, I asked, if these files are so illegal, wouldn't you be incriminating yourself by uploading them? I mean, possessing them is already a crime, right? My tone was light, almost conversational, like I was discussing the weather. Neville's smirk deepened, his eyes narrowing in amusement. He looked at me like I was a pawn in a game he was already winning. That's where you and I differ, Neville said with a smirk, his voice dripping with superiority. What's illegal for someone like you? Well, that's perfectly fine for someone like me. People with influence, power, and the right connections don't follow the same rules. So here's my advice. Stick to your little, quaint working-class ideals and leave the affairs of the elite to those who actually know how to play the game. Got it. I could hardly believe the words coming out of his mouth. It was so absurd, it felt like something straight out of a bad comedy. But the smug bastard standing in my living room wasn't joking. Before leaving, he threw in one last jab, twisting the knife a little deeper. Oh, and don't even think about retaliating against me or Lillian. With that, he turned, gesturing for Lillian to follow. She grabbed her overnight bag without so much as a glance in my direction. I wasn't just furious, I was utterly stunned. As I stood there, seething, I found myself silently thanking the burglar who had broken into my house the year before I met Lillian. That break-in had forced me to install a comprehensive surveillance system, motion-sensing cameras and voice-recording microphones, all synced to a secure cloud storage. What Lillian didn't know was that the system could be activated even when we were at home, something I'd kept to myself. Thankfully, it wasn't my personal phone, but a separate business phone I used for work. Grabbing my personal phone, I immediately dialed Samuel Jeff, my business lawyer and trusted confidant. Samuel wasn't just a lawyer, he was family. He'd married my older sister, Abigail, 10 years ago. Their happiness was tragically cut short when Abigail drowned during a vacation in Guadeloupe. Even after her death, Samuel stayed close to us, and 3 years later, he found love again with Heidi. They got married after a year of dating, and Lillian, my parents, and I had attended their wedding. Samuel and Heidi had become like siblings to me. When I explained the threats Neville had made and the bizarre situation surrounding Lillian's weekend getaway, Samuel didn't hesitate. He assured me that he and Heidi would be at my place in an hour with dinner. He told me to stay inside, turn off all communication devices, and avoid contacting anyone. His calm, confident voice gave me some much-needed peace of mind. While I waited, I reflected on the hour that had just passed. It was becoming painfully clear that Lillian had been drawn to Neville's power and charm, trading the love we once had for the influence he wielded. I thought back to how it all began, 5 years ago at a friend's birthday party. She had been a complete stranger to me back then, the sister of the birthday boy's army buddy stationed in Afghanistan. We'd clicked right away. We were married the following year. Back then, I worked for Mr. Higgins, a talented woodworker who owned a small business. He'd hired me part-time while I was in college to handle his books. In a matter of months, his business exploded, landing 3 major contracts that he couldn't handle on his own. When he asked me to help in the field, I stepped up without hesitation. In the beginning, my tasks were simple, but it didn't take long for my eagerness and quick learning to stand out. Before long, I was handling smaller projects on my own and became an essential part of the team for the more complex jobs. Despite my accounting degree, I discovered I had a real passion for hands-on work, which led me to pursue an apprenticeship. After years of dedication, I became certified and officially Mr. Higgins's associate. When he retired, my parents stepped in to help me buy his share of the business. Over 2 years, I gradually took full ownership. My business was booming. Recently, I had even hired 2 assistants, and my income was surpassing that of many attorneys in my wife's circle. Yet, Lillian remained oblivious to the extent of my success. Just then, the doorbell rang. It was Heidi and Samuel, carrying bags of Chinese takeout and a 6-pack of beer. "Archie, are you okay?" Heidi asked, pulling me into a warm hug. Her concern was genuine, and it was a relief to feel that care. "I can't believe Lillian did this to you. It's just not like her," she said, hesitating as she spoke. Samuel gave me a steadying hug, his presence grounding me. "Don't worry, man. We'll figure this out together. Let's eat first, and then I'll take a look at that recording," he reassured me. During dinner, I shared the full story of the humiliating encounter from earlier that afternoon. Afterward, I pulled out my laptop and opened the files containing the video and audio recordings. The clarity was shocking. "I can't believe what I just heard," Samuel exclaimed, his eyes wide in disbelief. "Yeah, what a complete arrogant jerk," I said, my tone dry. "Arrogant? More like a total idiot," Samuel shot back. "The guy's what, 40? 42? He's got a decade or more of experience. Yet his ego is so inflated that he's too stupid to realize that sometimes saying nothing is the smartest move." "That's great," I replied. "But can I even use this? I recorded it without his consent." "You're in the clear," Samuel said confidently. "This is your home, your property. You're within your rights to record anything that happens here. So, no legal risk?" I pressed, wanting to be sure. Samuel sighed, looking thoughtful. "Not exactly. Legally, you're on solid ground, but we need to be cautious." On the drive over, I did some digging while Heidi was behind the wheel. It turns out Chanter isn't just some rich asshole. He's the son of Albert Chanter, the founder of CBH. "You knew that, right?" I nodded, the weight of the name sinking in. "What you might not know," Samuel continued, "is that Albert Chanter wasn't exactly the sharpest tool in the shed when it came to law. He didn't win cases because of his brilliance. He won because of his connections. He had friends in high places. Most of the local judges were his college buddies. That network, it gave him the edge he needed to close nearly every case in his favor. Now, Neville, his son, is playing from the same playbook. That's what makes him so dangerous. He's not just rich, Archie, he's got influence. He's got power in the courtroom that could make even the most airtight case against him seem flimsy." "So, what? You're telling me I'm screwed no matter what I do?" I asked, the grim reality of it all settling in. "Not screwed," Samuel corrected firmly, "but it's going to be an uphill climb. The good news is that you've got me, and my connections, on your side. The key here is getting solid, undeniable evidence. And I've got a plan. But you just said the judges will side with him, I pointed out, my voice rising with frustration. They will, unless we take this to criminal court, Samuel explained. That's the play. We're going to flip the script and aim for criminal charges. Before I could respond, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find a petite brunette standing on the porch, holding a small bag. Mr. Addery? She asked politely. Hi, Emily. Come on in, Samuel called out, standing to greet her. Archie, this is Emily Harper. She's a computer expert from a private investigation firm I work with. I called her after we talked earlier. Emily entered, and as I briefed her on the threats Neville had made, particularly his plan to plant incriminating material on my computer, her expression hardened. She listened carefully, taking in every detail. Here's the deal, Emily said, her voice steady and professional. We've got two main possibilities for how Chanter might try to frame you. The first, and more likely, scenario is that he's going to physically access your computer. He'll change the timestamps on files, making it look like they've been there for longer than they actually have. If that happens, your surveillance system will capture everything. Just make sure all the cameras are recording before you leave the house. She then pulled out a small, sleek gray device from her bag. The second possibility is that Chanter might try to access your computer remotely. This module will monitor your entire network, recording any attempts to upload or download files. What we need to do right now is transfer all your sensitive and personal data to an external drive and wipe the computer clean. I'll help you with that to make sure nothing important gets lost. Her confidence was reassuring, and it was obvious she knew her stuff. Samuel spoke up. Let's get to work, Archie. Right now, the only solid evidence we have is the recording. But if you tried to go after Chanter with just that, the case could easily get tossed out, especially with his connections. Blackmail doesn't usually carry much weight in court, and his judge buddies would likely just sweep it under the rug. But if he actually goes through with planting illegal content on your computer, that changes everything. I felt my stomach tighten. You're saying we might actually have a shot? Samuel gave me a hard look. Think about it. If he reports you for possession of illegal material, we'll have a clear timeline showing that it was planted. We've already got the warning on tape, an airtight case. Even his judicial friends won't want to back him up when the details come out. No one's going to want to be associated with someone like him. For the first time all day, I felt a flicker of hope. If Chanter really was as stupid as he seemed, we could have the upper hand. I shook my head in disbelief. This is twisted. It's sick. Samuel's expression turned grim. Yeah, well, Chanter's just as twisted. One more thing. Can you avoid using your computer for the next few days? If Chanter moves forward with his plan and goes to the police, they'll inspect your computer for any activity. If you don't use it at all, the logs will remain clean. It'll work in our favor. Also, make sure your phone doesn't connect to your home Wi-Fi during this time. He might try to use your phone to plant the files instead. Emily got to work right away, installing the surveillance module and wiping sensitive information off both my computer and phone. This module will monitor and record any attempts to access your network, she explained. I'll send updates as soon as I've got something. Good luck, gentlemen, she added before heading out. Once the technical details were sorted, Samuel turned to me. Now, about the practical stuff. Do you want to start divorce proceedings immediately? Or would you prefer to wait and see if there's any chance of working things out when Lillian returns? I didn't hesitate. No, I want the divorce now. There's no point staying married to someone who's so easily manipulated by some self-important prick. I'm done. Samuel gave me a firm nod. Understood. I'll contact Sylvia Murphy first thing tomorrow. She's the best family lawyer we have. She'll handle everything quickly and fairly. Good, I said, relieved that I wouldn't have to face this alone. Samuel reassured me that Sylvia would be in touch as soon as possible. We discussed a few more details, and I handed over the access code to my surveillance system, ensuring that Samuel would have real-time updates and cloud-stored recordings to track any developments. By the time Samuel and Heidi left, it was well past 11 p.m., and the weight of the day caught up with me. I took a sleeping pill to calm my racing thoughts and was asleep within half an hour. The next morning, at 8:30 a.m., Sylvia called. She had already spoken with Samuel and was fully briefed on the situation. She asked me to meet her at her office at 11 a.m., and I agreed. At our meeting, Sylvia expressed her sympathies and acknowledged Neville Chanter's reputation. "Fortunately," she said, "since you purchased the house before you married Lillian and her name isn't on the deed, the property remains yours." She added that, with no children involved, the divorce would likely be straightforward. However, I was concerned about my business. Could she force me to sell it and divide the proceeds? I asked, anxiety creeping into my voice. Sylvia immediately summoned Samuel, who joined the meeting within minutes. "Relax, Archie," he said, offering me a reassuring smile. "Your marriage contract clearly states that the company is solely yours. Lillian has no claim to it. She might try to argue otherwise, but legally, she doesn't have a leg to stand on." I exhaled in relief. Feeling reassured, I wrapped up the meeting at 12:30 p.m. and followed Sylvia's advice on handling the financial aspects of the divorce. She promised Lillian would be served the papers at her office on Monday. After replacing my broken phone, I spent the rest of the weekend working in the yard, trying to focus on something other than the mess my life had become. As Sunday evening approached, I debated whether to sleep in the guest room or relegate Lillian to it. Ultimately, I decided it was my house, and since she had walked out on me, I wouldn't share my bed with her. I moved all her things into the guest room and installed a lockable doorknob on my bedroom, keeping the key in my pocket. When I heard Chanter's car pull into the driveway that evening, I activated the surveillance system. She waved at him as he drove away, then turned and entered the house. Feigning indifference, I stayed seated, pretending to read a book. She entered the living room with a strained cheerfulness. "Hi, honey," she said, her tone forced. "How was your weekend?" Without looking up, I replied flatly, "Fine." Her smile faltered, the act slipping. "Oh, great. Continue sulking, then. Neville warned me you'd act like this. It's so predictable. You lack the intelligence to understand my needs or the maturity to acknowledge your own failures." She spat, her mask finally cracking. I didn't respond, but I could feel the rage beginning to bubble. With a huff, she stormed upstairs. I began counting, each breath steadying me. 1, 2, 3. "Archie Addery, did you put a lock on our bedroom?" She shrieked from upstairs. "Correction," I called back calmly. "On my bedroom. Your things are in the guest room. That's where you'll stay until you find an apartment." "This is ridiculous. Just wait until Neville hears about this." "This wasn't part of the agreement," she yelled back. "Agreement? What agreement?" I asked, my voice cool with mock confusion. "I haven't agreed to any of your partner's nonsense. You can stay in the guest room or leave entirely. Maybe Chanter's wife has room for you in her marital bed." There was a beat of silence. Then she stormed into the guest room and slammed the door behind her. I followed her upstairs and, standing outside the door, called out, "By the way, what was in this so-called agreement for me? Care to explain?" The silence that followed was deafening. 15 minutes later, I returned downstairs, my phone buzzing with text messages from an unfamiliar number. I stared at the screen, incredulous as the words formed into the twisted, delusional message from Chanter. "What's this I hear, Archie? You locked Lillian out of her own room? I thought I made myself clear. Even someone like you should understand. For tonight, I'll overlook your childish tantrum. Tomorrow, you'll Archie Lillian's favorite dinner and apologize. If you behave all week, I'll allow her to spend time with you next weekend. Fail to comply and you'll learn just how serious my threats are. No questions. Clear?" This man was a bizarre mix of heartless, delusional, and idiotic. Without responding, I took a screenshot and sent it to Samuel. His reply came 3 minutes later. "Unbelievable. This guy thinks he's untouchable, but he's just a first-rate fool. Keep all the messages intact, and don't reply. Let him dig his own grave." Chanter sent a few more texts, but I left them unread, deliberately avoiding feeding into his nonsense. I needed to stay focused and calm. Eventually, Chanter stopped reaching out. I didn't see Lillian again that evening. I locked my bedroom door, ensuring the surveillance system was still recording. I waited until I was certain Lillian had left the house in the morning before getting up and preparing for the day. As I made breakfast, I downloaded the previous night's recordings from the surveillance system. Lillian hadn't emerged from the guest room until this morning, using the guest bathroom for a quick shower before leaving the house without eating. Surprisingly, she hadn't tried anything suspicious with my computer, contrary to my expectations. While finishing my coffee, I received a text from Sylvia Murphy. "Hi Archie, just confirming that the divorce papers will be served at 10:15 this morning. I've informed Samuel as well. Try to have as good a day as possible, considering everything." Before heading to my workshop, I double-checked that the surveillance system was active and set to send alerts to my phone if triggered. At 11 a.m., I had a meeting with an architect to finalize modifications for a client project. The busy work helped distract me, though I still anticipated a call from Lillian after she was served. To my surprise, the phone stayed silent. At 10:45, I texted Samuel to share my surprise. "Lillian hasn't called or messaged. I assume she's already spoken with Chandler. They're probably scheming." Samuel replied almost immediately, "Definitely possible. I'll get Emily involved. Stay tuned." The meeting went smoothly, which allowed me to focus for a change. I spent the rest of the afternoon cleaning tools and organizing my workshop until, at 3:12 p.m., my phone buzzed with an alert. "The show's starting," I texted Samuel. He responded with a thumbs-up emoji as I accessed the live feed on my security system. On screen, Lillian had entered the house with an unfamiliar man in tow. They headed straight to the home office, where the man powered on my computer. The two exchanged minimal conversation as he worked to bypass my password, eventually inserting a flash drive and performing a series of suspicious activities for about 10 minutes. The surveillance cameras captured crystal-clear images of his face. Meanwhile, Lillian packed her belongings into garbage bags, likely because her suitcases were still in the master bedroom closet. Once the man finished his task, he shut down the computer and said something to Lillian before leaving. She completed her packing and exited the house at 3:56 p.m. Shortly after the recording ended, Samuel called me. "All right, Archie. Go home and act as normal as possible. My guess is they'll try to involve the police either tonight or tomorrow. Be ready for a visit from an inspector. Warrants take a few hours, so it'll likely be tomorrow." "Is there a chance I'll be arrested?" I asked nervously. "There's always a possibility," Samuel admitted. "If it happens, stay silent. Don't answer any questions. I've already contacted Stephen Benson, a top-notch criminal defense lawyer. He has all the relevant information, including your recordings. He says this will be the easiest case he's ever handled." Before we hung up, I gave Samuel access codes for the alarm system and surveillance recordings, just in case. The evening passed uneventfully. No police visits, no calls from Lillian, and no taunting messages from Chandler. I made myself a sandwich, watched some TV, and resisted the urge to tell my parents about the situation. They wouldn't understand the complexities of tampering with computer systems or cloud-stored evidence, and I didn't want to worry them unnecessarily. The following day, while I was at the store, another security alert popped up. Someone had entered my house. I texted Samuel immediately and accessed the surveillance system. This time, the intruders were the police. They were trying to deactivate the alarm. Within minutes, the system went offline, indicating they'd succeeded. Samuel texted me, confirming he'd seen the activity and had forwarded the images to Stephen Benson. An hour later, 2 officers arrived at my shop. Without much fanfare, they handcuffed me, read me my rights, and placed me in the back of a squad car. They began asking questions, but I followed Samuel's advice and stayed silent. At the station, they confiscated my phone and wallet before putting me in a cell with 4 other detainees. The atmosphere was subdued. No one spoke, and everyone seemed more interested in the floor tiles than in each other. After about 3 hours, a guard escorted me to a meeting room. "What the hell?" I asked, confused. "I didn't request to see my lawyer yet." The door opened, and a man in a well-fitted suit entered. his expression calm but authoritative. He was in his early 40s, with dark hair and a serious demeanor. The guard closed the door behind him and left without a word. "Mr. Attery," the man said, his voice low and measured. "I'm Stephen Benson, your lawyer." He took a seat across from me, pulling out a legal pad and pen. "I'm assuming you know why you're here. The situation's a bit complicated, but I've got everything I need to get you out of this." I raised an eyebrow. "Really? They just throw me in a cell and wait for my lawyer to bail me out?" He gave me a thin smile. "Not exactly, but the arrest is just a formality. They know the case is weak. They're hoping you'll panic, slip up, or—" He paused, glancing at the guard who'd returned to stand outside the door. "They're trying to put pressure on you. But that's not going to happen." "I didn't do anything illegal," I said, shaking my head. "That's what I'm here to prove. You don't need to worry. I've already seen the footage and we have a plan." He flipped open his legal pad and started scribbling notes. "Now, we need to talk strategy." The guard remained silent, leaving me alone in the room. 10 minutes later, Neville Chandler walked in, his smug grin stretching as wide as the Golden Gate Bridge. "So, do you understand the gravity of your situation now?" he finally asked. I stayed silent. "I asked you a question, Attery. Answer me, you insignificant little bug," he snapped. Still, I refused to speak. "It's your word against mine," Chanter continued, leaning back in his chair. "A carpenter versus one of the most prominent lawyers in this city. Who do you think the court will believe?" His smirk never faltered. "Well, it seems like you need some time to think this over," he said, standing up. "Maybe a night back in your cell will help clarify things. Let's continue this chat tomorrow morning, shall we?" He left, and I was escorted back to the holding cell, now slightly less crowded. Later that afternoon, I was summoned again to the meeting room. This time, a tall blonde man with a stern, no-nonsense demeanor awaited me. He looked like he meant business. As I entered the room, the tall blonde man rose to greet me. "Good afternoon, Archie. It's a pleasure to meet you. I'm Jonathan Ellington. Please, just call me Jonathan. Samuel reached out earlier today, but he couldn't get through to you. Given the situation, we suspected you might have been arrested and brought here." Jonathan's demeanor was calm but professional, which helped ease my tension. I recounted the events of the afternoon, including the unsettling visit from Neville Chandler. Jonathan's jaw tightened as he listened, though he remained composed. "All right," he said when I finished. "You'll appear before a judge tomorrow morning. Expect a hefty bail amount, but don't worry, Samuel will handle it. I know spending a night here won't be easy, but stay strong. Samuel and I are both in your corner. In the meantime, continue refusing to answer any questions. I've officially taken on your case, and I'll make sure Chanter doesn't get away with this." The next day, I stood before a judge, maintaining my plea of not guilty to the absurd charge of possessing illegal materials. Bail was set at $25,000, and I was released later that afternoon. While I was prohibited from leaving the city or contacting Lillian, Chanter, or anyone from their firm, I was at least allowed to return to my shop and resume work. The police returned my phone and wallet, and Jonathan took me out for a late lunch to discuss the case in greater detail. "I kept things vague at the station," Jonathan explained, "but after doing some digging, I've uncovered quite a bit about Neville Chandler. Let me reassure you about a few things. First, the timeline is fishy. They brought you in before they even completed the search of your house, which is irregular. Second, the fact that Chanter was allowed to visit you despite restrictions on your communications suggests serious misconduct. This whole situation reeks of orchestration, and that's illegal. But what about Chanter's influence over judges?" I asked, still wary. Jonathan's expression softened into a knowing smile. "He has friends, sure, but not all of them. You can't make that many allies without creating a few enemies along the way. Trust me, we'll find a way around his connections." I sighed. I have no idea what's waiting for me at home. I just hope Lillian and her conniving partner didn't clean me out. Jonathan's face darkened at the mention of Lillian. "If they did, we'll make sure they regret it." Chandler may have the money and the power, but we've got the evidence and the law on our side. Stick with me, Archie. We'll take this down together. The comfort in his words was welcome, but it didn't fully assuage my anxiety. I had seen firsthand how dangerous Chandler could be, how manipulative, how willing to bend the rules for his own benefit. But Jonathan was right. The pieces were falling into place. Couldn't give up now. We finished our meal in relative silence, my mind whirring with plans, contingencies, and the looming threat of what awaited me at home. Jonathan drove me back to my shop, reminding me to stay calm, stay focused, and, most importantly, stay silent. He didn't want me engaging with anyone, especially not Lillian or Chandler, until we were ready. When I got home, I was bracing for the worst. The place seemed eerily quiet as I walked through the door. No sign of Lillian's things, no indication of Chandler's machinations. But I still felt a tightness in my chest, the sense that something wasn't right. I made my way to the home office, my heart racing as I pushed open the door. My computer was on, the screen flickering in the dim light. But what caught my attention was the open drawer in my desk, the one where I kept backups of my business files. I rushed over and rifled through the drawer. No sign of the backup drive I'd kept hidden. The feeling in the pit of my stomach intensified. It didn't take long to confirm it. Lillian and Chandler had already made their move. I slammed the drawer shut and called Jonathan. "Something's off," I said without preamble. "Lillian and Chandler, they've been here. They've taken the backup drive. I don't know what they're planning, but they're getting ahead of me." Jonathan's voice was calm but firm. "Don't panic. We already have a lot of evidence. What's important now is what you do next. The backup drive's gone, but we've got everything else in place. We'll get ahead of them. Just stay focused, Archie." I ran my hands through my hair, trying to steady myself. "I'm not giving up, Jonathan. They won't win this." "I know," he said, his voice reassuring. "And neither will I." "Don't worry about it," Jonathan reassured me. "Samuel went over to your place right after the police left. He rearmed your system and set it back to recording. No one's been there since." After picking up my car from the shop, I drove home, eager to take a much-needed shower. On the way, I received a message from my architect confirming that the client had approved the revised plans. Small comfort, but at least something had gone right today. When I walked into the house, I was hit with the sight of complete chaos. It was clear every room had been thoroughly searched. The computer, naturally, was the focus of their so-called investigation. But I wasn't worried. They wouldn't find anything that could incriminate me. As I began cleaning up the mess, I felt the weight of it all and finally broke down, the tears falling freely for the first time. Just 1 week ago, I thought I had a stable marriage. Now, I was not only a suspect in a crime I didn't commit, but also on the brink of divorce and at the mercy of my wife's manipulative boss. How had everything gone so horribly wrong? At least the media hadn't latched onto the story. They seemed to be too caught up in the brewing scandal over the massive hole in public finances, which, for once, worked to my advantage. Later that week, Jonathan called with some surprisingly good news. "Archie, all the charges against you have been dropped. The inspector handling your case is tough, especially with blackmail. He wasn't swayed by Chandler's influence and has filed charges against Neville Chandler for blackmail, evidence tampering, and possession of illegal materials. Lillian's also being charged for conspiracy in these crimes." I let out a long breath, feeling a sliver of relief. Finally, something that resembled justice. Shortly after Jonathan's call, Samuel reached out, inviting me to dinner. On the way there, my family lawyer, Sylvia Murphy, called. "Archie," she began, her voice clipped. "I've just heard from Lillian's attorney. She's ready to sign the divorce papers with no changes. But she has one condition. She wants a private 1-hour meeting with you. She suggested we hold it at my office." The idea of facing Lillian again made my stomach churn, but I knew it might speed things up. "Fine," I replied. "Let's do it. I just want this over with as quickly as possible." That evening with Samuel and Heidi was the first time in weeks that I felt a sense of peace. Heidi had prepared a delicious meal of coconut shrimp and rice, and their company was a welcome break from the chaos. By the time I headed home, I felt a little more grounded. The meeting with Lillian was set for the following Wednesday. Despite knowing I was the victim in this whole mess, I couldn't shake the nervous energy building inside me. When the day finally came, I arrived at Sylvia's office. She greeted me with a calm but cautious air. "Archie," she said softly, "I don't know what Lillian plans to discuss, but I need to remind you, there are still criminal charges hanging over her head. Be careful." "Be cautious, Archie," Sylvia advised. "Don't say anything that could be twisted into something damaging later. We can't search her for recording devices, so assume she might be recording this conversation. Stay sharp." "Thanks for the heads up," I said, steeling myself for whatever was about to unfold. I was escorted into a small, private room where Lillian was already seated. I braced myself for her usual venomous attitude, but when I saw her, I barely recognized her. She looked drained, a mere shadow of the woman she'd been. For a brief moment, I felt a flicker of sympathy, but the memories of her shameless behavior with Chanter quickly snuffed it out. "Thank you for agreeing to meet, Archie," she said, her voice shaking. "What could you possibly have to say to me, Lillian?" I shot back coldly. "After everything you've done?" Tears welled up in her eyes. "Archie, I'm so ashamed of myself and how I treated you. You're an incredible husband, and you didn't deserve any of this." Her voice cracked. "Neville Chanter had me completely under his control. When I heard the charges against you were dropped, and realized I might be facing charges myself, it snapped me out of his grip. I can barely look at myself in the mirror now. And for what? For a pointless, meaningless affair." She broke down completely, sobbing in front of me. For the next half hour, she poured out a litany of self-reflection and regret, dissecting her actions with a mix of guilt and self-loathing. To my surprise, she didn't ask for anything from me or try to extract any information. "I know it's over between us," she said finally, wiping her face. "If I were in your position, I'd want a divorce too. I don't blame you for ending it. I've already resigned from my job and told Neville Chanter I never want to see him again. I moved back in with my parents, and trust me, it's not pretty there. The tension is unbearable." I stayed silent, just watching her. What was there to say? She'd brought this on herself, and now she had to deal with the fallout. "The next few months, maybe years, are going to be tough for me," she continued. "I don't know what the future holds, but I hope that, after everything settles down, we might be able to be friends again." "That's a long shot, Lillian." "A very long shot," I replied, standing up. "Good luck with everything." As I stepped out of the room, a small part of me still felt something for Lillian, but any thoughts of reconciliation were long gone. The situation had punished her far more than I ever could. Revenge seemed pointless now. Life had already dealt her a lesson she wouldn't forget anytime soon. Lillian eventually cooperated with the authorities, striking a plea deal by providing incriminating evidence against Chanter. She moved to another city, and after that we lost all contact. Meanwhile, Chanter's dirty dealings were exposed to the public. 2 other victims came forward with blackmail allegations, which only strengthened the case against him. With a mountain of evidence, including recordings of his threats, Chanter was convicted and sentenced to 12 years behind bars. I didn't even need to testify. Once the trial was over, I filed a civil suit against Chanter and the remnants of his firm. It ended in a $2 million settlement. A significant portion of that went to Samuel, as a token of my appreciation for his unwavering support. At first, Samuel refused, but I insisted. His help had been nothing short of invaluable. Slowly but surely, things began to look up. My business took off, and I was in the process of acquiring a specialty door manufacturer. The new team I'd built, 6 employees, felt more like an extension of my family than a workforce. Not long after my divorce was finalized, Samuel and Heidi invited me to a barbecue. That's when I met Heidi's younger sister, Grace. We hit it off instantly, and after a few weeks of dating, I started feeling optimistic about what the future could hold. Weeks later, with the civil case finally behind me, I decided to pay Chanter a visit in prison. I made sure to instruct the guard to keep Chanter in the room for our little chat. When he saw me, His face twisted into a mask of pure rage. "What do you want, Archie?" he sneered, trying to walk out. The guard stepped in, blocking his way and forcing him to sit down. I leaned back in my chair with a smug grin. "Just thought I'd check in. Heard your wife, Patricia, filed for divorce. Maybe I'll take her out for dinner sometime. Show her a good time." Chanter's eyes went wide, and his anger flared. "You bastard!" he growled, standing up in fury. "Don't waste your breath." I cut him off, still grinning. "I've already done that. By the way, Patricia's hummingbird tattoo on her upper thigh? Very charming, don't you think?" His face turned a deep crimson as his fury rendered him speechless for a moment. As he opened his mouth to shout more threats, he stopped, realizing there was nothing he could say that would give him the upper hand. "Relax, Chanter," I said, leaning forward slightly. "I didn't come here to talk about Patricia. I came to remind you just how much of a fool you are. A spectacularly arrogant fool. Showing up at someone's house and laying out your blackmail plans? That's not just dumb, Chanter. That's amateur hour. Even a lowly carpenter could have outsmarted you." Chanter's fists clenched, his whole body shaking with rage, but I couldn't help but laugh. "Wasn't it you who said certain materials were illegal for a man like me, but totally fine for someone as powerful as you?" I taunted. "Look at you now, though. That orange jumpsuit really suits you, doesn't it? Makes you look even more grand." Chanter's face was close to breaking down, but I wasn't done yet. "Before I leave, I've got something Patricia and Lillian thought you might find enlightening." I slid a folded piece of paper across the table. He snatched it up, unfolding it with irritation. I pointed to the crude drawing on the page. "That, Chanter, is a diagram of female anatomy, specifically a part of it that men often overlook. You see, they thought it was about time someone educated you on its location." Chanter's face turned a deep shade of beet red as I stood up, chuckling to myself as I walked out.